Hi everyone and welcome to the 2024 Spring Wreath Kit tutorial. Just wanted you to check that you're on the 2024 version because there's quite a collection of these tutorials now on my YouTube channel. So yeah, just check you're on the right one. And yeah, I'm really excited to be making this spring wreath with you. I always feel like a wreath for me signifies the start of a new season. It was actually a really sunny day this morning. So yeah, it feels like it's time. And I guess just first of all, if you haven't even opened your kit yet and you've had it delivered, please go and open it. Take everything out of the paper wrap, which has got all of this inside it, and it will also have your wire ring, bind wire in it if you're looking for that. We often get asked, where's my bind wire? And it is definitely in there. I wrapped them. So if it isn't, then you can blame me. And then take everything out and give everything a good snip. So you want to take a good inch off the ends of the stems with some sharp snips and plunge them straight into a nice clean vase with some fresh water in it. And now I kind of say you could leave it up to 3 days before you make it. I know some of you might leave it a bit longer, that's fine. Leave it somewhere cool and dark. A garage is perfect, a shed is perfect. And that way the flowers are going to retain as much of their kind of like moisture and everything that you need them to. For the actual flowers with the tulips and the paper whites, obviously these won't have been in water for 24 hours once they reach you. They're pretty hardy and the weather's pretty good at the moment. It's unlikely they'll arrive with you floppy and wilting, but if they are, do not panic. Spring flowers are quite amazing. Again, just chop a good inch off the end of the stems. You could even remove a leaf or two if you feel necessary and put them straight into water, and in like an hour or two they will really perk up. The muscari, take it out of the bag, give it a good drink, leave it somewhere with your foliage, cool and dark. The bag of moss can be left as is, and you can leave all kind of your tools like these water vials, the wreath ring, the twine. You can leave them in the box until you're ready to make it. And yeah, then once you are ready to make it, I like working on a surface that's a little bit higher up just because it doesn't hurt my back bending over all the time, so the kitchen island is perfect, or any kitchen surface. Yeah, just somewhere where you've got like enough space and you don't mind it getting a little bit messy, because that's kind of the first bit that we're going to do, is a little bit messy, but it's the fun part. So we're going to start by making the mossed base for our wreath. So the moss is basically going to act as a moisture source for all of the flowers and foliage, and it's a living product. Is this lovely moss, and it's got twigs in it, it's got leaves in it. Just got to embrace it. Get rid of the bag. And then with your ring, you may even notice, this one's okay actually, but some of them where they've been welded, there might be like a slight gap and you might think, oh, it's broken. It's not broken, it's completely normal. Once we kind of get working on it, it doesn't matter at all. As long as it's a circle, we've not sent you a funny looking shape, then you're fine. So first things first, we're just gonna make a kind of zigzagged base for the moss to sit on. I'm not even gonna remove this, you can do if you want to, the tag, but you're not even gonna see it. So I'm just gonna loop my wire around the frame, just a few times like that. I tend to do it where there's a join there. And then we're just going to zigzag the wire around that frame. And you want to keep this relatively tight. You don't want it to be loose. And just go around the whole way. And this basically just helps any of the moss kind of cling onto something rather than just kind of potentially falling straight through. Gives it a bit more security. It's funny, isn't it? Like when you start a habit of doing something that you just always do it, and this is just something that I've just always done. Okay, so all the way back to the start. And you can just leave it like that for a second, because we're going to start putting our moss on the wreath. So the moss could be dry when you receive it, it might be completely soaking wet. It comes to us in all different types, to be honest. As long as it's damp, then it's fine. So if it's too dry, just literally just get a jug of water or something, or spritz it so that it's nice and damp. If it's really, really wet, you can actually just squeeze them out. I've done it many times, just squeeze it over a bucket or outside or somewhere, and that'll be perfect. So we're just gonna take some nice chunky pieces of the moss and just position it on top of the wire frame, like so, and then wrap our wire around it again in a zigzag formation. I like to use it green side up. You'll notice kind of the moss has two sides really, so a more like lush green side and then this lovely dark bit at the back. You can use it any way around. I prefer to use it the green way, just because you might see some of the moss at the end of the wreath, which I think kind of adds to this whole look of the spring wreath. So just making sure that the wire base is nice and covered and you're keeping that wire nice and tight. And just kind of keep overlapping it. So it's nice and chunky. And if you've got any moss left over, you can top it on planters, which always looks really effective and nice. Even with like a few little quail's eggs for Easter is lovely. So right round back to the beginning. And if you've kind of been here for a while, as in you've watched many a tutorial of me making a wreath before, you'll know that I normally leave my wire attached to the wreath base at this point. But with the spring wreath, it's quite a bit different to how we normally make like the traditional bundles with our wreaths. So I'm actually going to be securing this off, because the next thing we're going to be doing is adding our lovely bulbs. So I'm just going to turn the wreath over. And I'm going to cut a length off the wire. Now make sure that you've given it a nice tug and that everything feels nice and secure. Cut about that much off to the wire, and then you're just going to use this to kind of go under the wire frame and back again just a couple of times, just to make sure that it's kind of tied off nicely and it's not going anywhere, like a needle and thread. And then poke the remaining piece into the moss so that it's not going to scratch anything, like that. So clear any of the remaining little bits of moss over to one side for now, because we're still in the messy bit, because we're about to do our lovely bulbs. So with the bulbs, take them out of their pot. And we're going to be breaking into this so that we can get the bulbs individually out. So you want them like that. You can shake off any of the excess soil. I always get asked, how do they survive without the soil? But spring bulbs, or muscari, hyacinths in particular, do not need their compost for any nutrients. They are absolutely fine just with their roots. You can even break their roots and they'll still be pretty happy. I also quite like seeing some of the roots on the wreath. I think it just, yeah, I just like it. You can, if you want to, kind of wash away all of the compost, which will also hydrate all of the roots. I have already given these a really good water so that I know that the roots are hydrated. But if you haven't, or if you're worried about them, just go and give them a bit of a water before you attach them to your wreath, but they'll still get some hydration from the moss. So you just want to start positioning these onto your frame, and I like to kind of decide where my top and bottom is. It doesn't really matter at this point at all, but let's say this is going to be my top and this will be the bottom of my wreath. And the reason is for that, because I don't really want to put a bulb at the top kind of in that direction, because whatever you do, that bulb is going to fight for the sunlight to gravity and you're going to get a bit of a wonky growth of your muscari. So I like to position them almost on the sides and the bottom, just to give them the best chance of looking their best. So probably something like that would be quite nice. Bit of a cluster here and maybe a bit more spread out on this side. And then I know that they're all going to grow and be happy. So to attach these to your wreath, we're just going to take a length of our bind wire and cut a little bit off. And very simply, just going to go all the way under the base. And we're just going to tie it on the point, a nice strong point of that bulb, and give it a little twist. And then cut it off. Like so. Going to move that one out of the way whilst I do this one. And you often get these kind of smaller bulbs and side shoots. They may come to something, but often the main bulb will be the one that shoots. But I'm going to leave them on anyway. You don't need these to be really, really tight, because you want to give the bulb the best possible chance. So, and you also don't want to break the foliage or anything that's already there. So just be mindful of that when you're tying that wire. Nice little twist. Trim off those ends. And I often cover kind of care at the end of making the wreath, but if the weather is quite warm, then you can just get a little spritz bottle and just spritz the roots of the muscari if you're worried about them. because you decided to film me doing this one. We got there. Okay, so once you're happy with the positioning of all of your mascara, we're going to be using our water vials, which if you're new to wreath making, this will probably seem very, very strange that we're using such things. But basically, for our tulips and the paper whites, which are these lovely flowers, just the moss alone wouldn't really be enough to keep these very, very happy for much longer than a few days. And we want them to kind of bloom into they're lovely. I mean, these tulips are one of my favourites. These are double white tulips mondial, and yeah, they're just heavenly once they open. So we really want to let them sing. So we're using the water vials to keep them hydrated. And then once those tulips and then paper whites go over, you've then got the opportunity to replace them and just take the cap off the water vial, top it up with maybe a long spouted watering can, and replace it with fresh tulips and paper whites, or any kind of spring bulbs that you can get your hands on. They're full in the supermarkets with nice different ones. You can get colourful ones so that your wreath kind of takes on a bit of a different identity. So yeah, that's why we're using these. I have gone and already filled these up. I say kind of just over half. You want to fill them with some nice fresh water. And the lid is this nice kind of rubbery feel. It's got a really tiny hole that isn't going to fit our tulips or paper whites. So I'm just going to snip like a little slit, like that, and then place that back on. And then I'm going to take one stem and I'm going to kind of measure it up against it. So I probably want the tulip to come out maybe about 1 inch. And you don't need the stem to go all the way to the bottom, like to touch it, because tulips do actually grow. So you just want to cut it just above kind of the end of that water vial and get it straight into there, like so. And then you can just place them down until we're going to add them all to it. And exactly the same with the paper white. So just give that lid a little slit. Snip the end, pop it in. And we're just going to do that for all of the tulips and the paper whites. And these paper whites are probably one of my favourite scent of flowers. They're just so lovely, as is the white genesta actually. It's been in our utility overnight because it's nice and cool in there, and it smells amazing. And this has actually been some of the best genesta that I've seen over the years. It's obviously had a really good growing season. Okay, and then last one here. So you've got 3 of each. Like so. So I'm just going to remove those whilst we position these. So because you've got 6 of these, you want to position them in kind of random places. You don't want all your 3 tulips or all your paper whites. Well, I personally don't. Obviously you can do whatever you think you want to do. And also we do need to think about gravity here, because we don't want to put in a tulip upside down, because the water isn't going to be able to hydrate it, because it's going to leave that air pocket at the bottom. So you always want to make sure that the positioning is allowing the stem to drink up that water. So those kind of angles are much easier to work with. So I'm probably thinking about doing a few there. These are a bit harder to get them to stay whilst you're trying to imagine where they'll be. But yeah, probably one there and then that last one up there. So again, we're going to attach these in exactly the same way that we've just done the mascari, just with a little bit of wire. And I'm just going to go under that mascari to make sure that I don't damage them leaves in any way. Twist it a few times until it's nice and secure. You can be much tighter with these because obviously the plastic tube will not be affected. And then trim that off. And you're probably thinking at this point, how on earth am I going to hide these tubes and all these roots? But that's where all of our lovely foliage and the genesta comes in. It's kind of like doing a wreath back to front when you do a spring wreath, I always think. And it can be a little bit tricky because you're trying to be careful of everything else that you put on the wreath, but just take your time, there is no rush. Hopefully you find it quite relaxing and quite therapeutic to just be in the zone of focusing just on making your wreath. Under that mascari. And my last one, probably going to pop around here. I think my stem might be a bit too big there, so I am just going to trim that down ever so slightly. About there. Always best to start too big than going too small with flowers, because once it's gone, you can't put it back on. Just delicately moving that tulip out my way. And tying on that last water vial. And then that's the major kind of foundations made now for your spring wreath, which is exciting because we can start doing all the lovely, adding all these lovely bits in now. So I'm just going to actually tidy up my area a little bit. And then bring in all of our lovely foliage, which is our olive, the pittosporum, and that gorgeous white genesta, and our eggs. The eggs are the last thing we're actually going to pop on, but I'll just leave them to one side for now. So bring back in the wreath. And time to start filling in all of the moss and all of the gaps with all of these lovely foliage. So you can just start by trimming all of your stems if you want to, so that you can do it all at once. But I kind of tend to do it as I go along. I just find it easier to know where I want things to go. Now, normally, if you've watched me make like a Christmas wreath or the autumn wreath, I'll cut the foliage like really long. But with the spring wreath, don't get me wrong, I love a huge statement wreath, obviously. But with the spring wreath, I like these to be a bit neater. And with that, they become a bit smaller. Believe me, I've tried to see how it looks, making them a bit bigger. And for me, it just doesn't work. There's something about it being slightly neater. So the foliage I'm going to be cutting, you'll notice I'll be cutting it slightly smaller. And you want to cut it at a 45-degree angle. So you've got a slight point to make inserting it into the moss much easier. So you're just going to simply insert it into that moss until it feels like it's kind of not going anywhere. And you're just going to do that the whole way around. And you'll notice that I've done that at an angle. So I'm wanting this to look circular when I'm finished with it. So my foliage is going to start in this direction and go all the way around the wreath. Like that. It's kind of the easiest way I can describe it, really. But you'll notice as I start kind of moving down that I'll change the direction of the foliage. So I'm going to start by doing all of the olive, and then I'll do all of the pittosporum. You can do a mixture if you want to, if you find you just want to see what it looks like straight away. Obviously, just pay attention to those, your bulbs. You don't want to cover them, but don't worry too much because they are obviously in the very, very early stages of growth. They've got quite a long way to go yet, so they will pop through the foliage, but they do also need a little bit of sunlight or daylight if we don't get any sun. And obviously, just trying to get those water vials covered with your foliage. Not forgetting about kind of the inside of your wreath, around here, and also the outside, because you are going to see a wreath from all angles. Now, even this piece is too long. So just for reference there, if you're wondering what I was doing. And even though our water vials are going in that direction for gravity to help them drink their water, we still want the foliage to go in the other direction, just so that it still takes on that lovely circular shape, because it doesn't matter about the direction of the water vials because we're not going to see them at the end. Love a curly bit of olive. Get that in around the side. You could also add, I was thinking about this, I went for a walk the other day and all the lovely blackthorn and hawthorn blossoms are out, and I just think they would be so pretty in this wreath. In fact, I might do it for the live tutorial next week if it's still around, because it would look so pretty. really delicate. It may not last for ages, but it's worth it, in my opinion. So you'll notice that my stem's very much going in that direction. Okay. I don't want to do too much more on the olive because we've still got the pittosporum to go. So I'm going to kind of hold fire on where I'm at, just this one little piece in there, and pop the pittosporum in next. And then if I'm still thinking there's too many gaps or I'm not happy, then I can come back to it. So exactly the same with the pittosporum. You're just cutting off small pieces on these branches, so these are perfect. You don't have to do them all. Just having some made up is quite handy. And then, yeah, exactly the same as we were just doing with the olive. You're just going through and making sure you're covering up those water vials, any gaps. You're keeping that foliage in the same direction. I love this kind of, it's like variegated, where it's almost more whitey on the ends, or ivory probably. It just looks really springy, and I just think it works so well with the tulips. Now some of these on the pittosporum you might find are quite like bulky at the ends of the stems, like this one. And you don't really want a clump of pittosporum because it's just going to stand out a bit too much. So just cut the side shoots off and use those. And it'll be look much more kind of natural than having a little clump. This one is now fine to use. And you can see it's starting to come together now. And just kind of filling in any gaps where you want them to be filled in. Covering up those vials. Going back to using the olive if you feel you need to, if you want to break it up a little bit. And pay attention to the kind of shape that you're starting to form. Like, does it feel bigger on one side? Does it feel circular? Does it feel lopsided? Just try and have a little look, and even go and walk away, go and make yourself a drink and come back to it with kind of fresh eyes, because often that's when we start to notice, oh yeah, actually I could fill it in a bit more there, or yeah, hopefully you get the idea. But I think I'm pretty happy with that. Maybe just a couple in there at the top. Because really the top is kind of the only place where we haven't really put bulbs and our flowers, so that's probably the place that's most dense with our foliage. And then once you're happy with the positioning of your foliage, we can add in the lovely genesta. So this stuff is quite amazing. You get kind of a main stem, which I'll show you, like the chunky one, which you can see down there, which is like the spine. And then you have all these lovely side flowers to play with. So I tend to cut the top off. Again, you don't want these too long because you don't want it to suddenly start taking on a completely different shape, but I don't mind these being slightly longer than the foliage. So you're just going to trim these off in little sections. As you get to the bottom, you'll notice these bits often start to become longer and longer. And I have even just trimmed those long pieces off and worked with them on their own, which is slightly more time consuming, but you get a really nice kind of feathery, whimsical finish to your wreath. So let's start using this stem first. And exactly the same as with the foliage, you're going to be inserting these at an angle right into the moss to keep it nice and hydrated. And I think they work quite nicely, just kind of tucked behind. You don't want them to be too overpowering. Just kind of nestling them in a little bit. The beauty of kind of using the moss as well is that if you're not happy with the positioning of something, you can just very, very easily remove it. And I think that bit is probably too dense, as gorgeous as it is. So I'm actually going to cut some of these side shoots off and use them as individual little stems. Just feels slightly more in proportion with everything. You can try and tuck these under some of the wire if you want. I've just tucked that one right under the wire that was holding that water violin, just to give it some extra security. The single ones can be a bit more tricky to kind of insert into the moss, but if you can join them onto a wire, then that will give them that support. And then again, we'll do the same for all of these. stems. Just go the whole way around, trying to keep that kind of lightness about it, removing anything that feels too bulky. Some of them you'll find just going so easily, whereas others are a bit harder work. And it just depends on the moss and the stem that you're working with. But don't worry, that's the beauty with floristry, you can just make it your own. Love the kind of deep burgundy that these almost have on their flowers. Just adds like a whole new kind of depth to the wreath. It's such a lovely stem to get hold of if you can for like even just normal vase flower arrangements at springtime. This is the best time of year to get hold of them. You can get them in yellow, white, yeah, lots of different colours actually now. Obviously, I just love the white. Oops, that's kind of going, poking out to the side rather than diagonally. But we can just take it out and pop it back in. Okay, I don't want to overdo it with the genesta, yeah, although very tempting because it is so pretty. So I'm going to stop there, I think, and just go back to a little bit of the foliage. Just to break that genesta up ever so slightly. You can take as much time as you like doing all these like final little tweaky bits. I start to get conscious at this point whether Chris's arms are about to fall off. So I don't want to take up too much time. I can't wait to see these little bulbs start to peek through. I've actually got another wreath on the door at the moment, our spring willow wreath, and I've just put mascaris and moss on it, and it's been doing so well. They're all in flower. I think it will carry on going for quite some time actually, but it will be replaced by this shortly, and I'll have to move the other one to the garden somewhere. One thing you could do if you've got somebody with you, or if you've got a mirror, is hold your wreath up kind of in front of the mirror, or get your friend to hold it up for you, just so you can start to see how it's starting to look, making sure that you're happy with the shape, because often that's when you notice things. Like, I don't know, from your point of view, this side looks a little bit empty. It certainly does from my view back here. Like, I feel like I need a bit of genesta going on in there. So it's a really good thing to do just to get a good point of view. So I'm just going to pop in some of that lovely feathery white genesta there. And if you don't have a mirror, and if you're not making it with somebody, then just pop it on the floor and stand like over it, and you'll get a really good view. Or if you've got a hook, try and hang it off the hook. Might be a bit too long. It's really tempting, I find anyway, at this point, to make it much, much bigger. If you go too big, you do start to lose all them lovely flowers that we've popped in, and yeah, so it's kind of a fine line. Not getting too carried away, which I'm probably not very good at when it comes to wreaths anyway. Okay, so I think I'm finished faffing with my foliage and bits and bobs, which I can leave there for now. And we can pop in our lovely eggs, which just finish it off really beautifully. They add a little splash of that ivory. They've got the lovely feathers on. Yeah, they just sing kind of spring Easter to me. Oh, that is probably something that you've been ordering, Chris, off Amazon or something. So apologies about our doorbell. So I'm just going to cut these wooden sticks. They cut really, really easily, again, just at an angle, and nestle these in kind of more of a triangle, slightly off a triangle formation, which I'll start one up here. And they obviously just go in really easily, like so. One down here. And then one, yeah, I think over there would be nice. Maybe tuck that in ever so slightly more, because I feel like the other two are longer, so I just want this one to feel a bit more nestled into all that foliage and loveliness, like so. And the very, very last thing to do is to just attach your twine to hang it from. I'm just going to double it over so that you've just got a nice loop at the end, and lift it up gently. And you want to find that copper wire that we started with, and I'm just simply going to loop that underneath and then pull that 2 pieces of string back through. And you'll find this isn't nearly as heavy as some of the other Christmas and other kits that we've made. And then just gently lay it down and just pop a nice knot in the top wherever you need to, based on your door. We now have a nail on the inside, so mine has to be a little bit longer than it used to be. Yeah. And then, yeah, just, I've now seen the wreath from a different angle, so I just thought I'd pop in a tiny bit more foliage in there, but I really am finished. So I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed making your spring wreath. I would absolutely love to see it on your doors. I'd love to see you making them. I know lots of you were doing some lovely kind of gatherings with friends and stuff, which is always really lovely for us to see. So please do share. I would love to see, and I hope you, yeah, really, really proud of yourselves for making a beautiful wreath. And housekeeping wise, like I said, really simple. Spritz the roots of the bulbs if you're worried about them. You can even spritz the back of the wreath if you feel like it's like really, really dry, but don't worry too much. I don't think I've actually ever spritzed the back of my wreaths, because timing wise with the weather and stuff, it should be fine. And yeah, replace the flowers in them water vials as and when you need to kind of give it a new lease of life. But thank you so much for watching and joining us, and I hope to see your wreaths on your doors soon.